May the 4th be with you, 2012. My friends are gathered at my apartment. We each wrote down on slips of paper which Star Wars movie we wanted to watch. Episode 6 was drawn, and we all had a good time. That was until my friend started reading the slips of paper and, to quote them verbatim, said,
"Who wrote episode 1? That had better have been written as a joke."
Over 10 years later, and after researching the films meticulously, I can now confidently say, it was me! I wrote episode 1 because episode 1 is the best Star Wars movie.
No. It's not at all what you think.
Now, before you stop watching the video to send me to an early grave because wars have been fought for less, 2 quick things. Please hear out and watch this video before disliking, and if you're still upset, please tell me in the comments, as it will help me change my mind more than a dislike would. Okay? The easiest way to understand why episode 1 is the best is by looking at all the other episodes in comparison. So let me count down to 1 to prove why it's 1. Episode 9 is a movie that is always trying to shock and wow with in-your-face action and quote-unquote surprising reveals. This constant shock leaves little room for significance in the story. Not that mindless fun can't make a great film, I just don't believe it makes a great Star Wars film. Once you hear this, you can't unhear it. Star Wars Episode 8 set out to undo everything done by J.J. Abrams in Episode 7. In doing so, it destroys the characters and the direction of 7. However, it does not build these themes back up. Personally, I believe Star Wars Episode 8 deserves the title of Worst Star Wars Movie that one usually earns. Episode 7 is a fine movie deserving of being people's favorite Star Wars, as it is a modern-day interpretation that successfully recreates the lightning in the bottle that was the original Star Wars trilogy. However, the film does this by copying the same story points as Episode 4, but with different characters playing the roles. Every other Star Wars movie has a plot that is original to itself. I don't believe Episode 7 should be considered the best Star Wars movie due to its imitation. Episode 6 is a fine Star Wars film, but it fails to be the greatest in a couple of ways. The forest planet of Endor is an all-around boring location for the film and lacks the excitement of all the other locations in the franchise, and unfortunately, a big chunk of the film is shot here. The film also suffers because it has the same climactic conclusion as Episode 4. Although incredible otherwise, these 2 points make the film out of contention. Episode 5 has 2 great scenes: the opening battle on the ice planet of Hoth, and Luke dueling Darth Vader. Unfortunately, everything else in between is forgettable, if not for repeated viewings, and is mostly exposition or actions to connect these 2 scenes, as well as the 2 movies surrounding it together. I know it's a bold statement to call Yoda and the giant space worm forgettable, but what I mean is, they lack the excitement and the significance of those 2 other scenes. Now, this is typically overlooked due to the major plot twist at the end of the film, but like The Sixth Sense or a Shyamalan film, making the twist the one redeeming factor of the film makes repeated viewings less enjoyable. The greatest Star Wars film should be enjoyable to rewatch. Episode 5, for the most part, is not. Episode 4, the original. I admit, it's hard not to make this the best, but here's my reasoning. The film tries to shock the viewer as much as possible to keep them engaged. Thank goodness they escaped the massive shootout by landing in the trash compactor. Oh no! Now the compactor's compacting! Besides the ending of the film, there's no build up to anything. Even in that last sequence, it tries to force in more surprises. Simply put, the film lacks payoff. Episode 3 is a great film, but its darker PG-13 nature seems to take it away from what a Star Wars movie is. It's not fun for the whole family, and although it answers a lot of questions on how the prequel trilogy connects to 4, it just sets up scenarios with an attitude of, you get where this is going. Honestly, if they made this film into a 2-part series, it would probably be the best Star Wars film, but it's too compact and dark for that title. Episode 2 is a very underappreciated film as it takes a throwaway line from Obi-Wan to Luke and turns The Clone Wars into one of the most expounded upon idea in all of the Star Wars universe. The scenes in Episode 2 build well upon each other, and the discovery of who the clones are and what they become at the end of the film is chilling. However, these great scenes are interrupted by scenes of Anakin and Padme falling in love with each other. These scenes are essential for the overall plot, but are poorly acted and paced, dragging down what is probably the best movie in the franchise to one most fans call okay. Why Episode 1 is so great is that it takes the problems from all the other films and fixes them. Episode 1 does more than just shock you. It supports instead of undoing its previous films. It does not retread story beats. There's no Endor. It's designed to be rewatched. It's a lighthearted adventure, and the scenes of Anakin and Padme are cute. Seriously, that "Are you an angel?" scene is totes adorable. The best part about Episode 1, however, is how scenes just build and then pay off. Episode 1 will say, "This is where we're going." Then you get to see that stuffing unfold. These directional scenes add weight to the action instead of just having pointless action. Plus, there's several plot threads unfolding at once, so they can just have a story-driven scene interjected between 2 action-heavy scenes, and all of it looks gorgeous. Speaking of looking gorgeous, it's locales. Unlike Episode 6's boring Endor, Episode 1 is full of unique and some of the best locations in the series. The bright color palette and the beautiful architecture ingrain these locations into our hearts and memories. Also, Episode 1 introduced so many great new locations, like Coruscant, Naboo City, Tatooine, the hills of the Outer Rim, and, of course, the Galactic Senate Building, which I will discuss the negatives, but for now, can we appreciate the beauty of this composition? It's the perfect backdrop to the perfect story. Episode 1 has the most unique premise for a story. I say it's the most unique because it's the only one where the world is at peace. But yet you get to see the underlying conflict grow. I feel like the building of anticipation is the most engaging and interesting part of a story. Watching Episode 1 is like seeing a mortar get lit, shoo, into the air, and then it spends the other 8 episodes popping. And before I move on to the negatives, I want to discuss an important part of the story. One that makes it so great. It's a character, actually. Darth Maul is one of the coolest characters in Star Wars ever. And if anyone said they did not get chills to the point of goosebumps when a second laser pops out of the bottom of his lightsaber, they're lying. Okay, now to address the Gungan in the room. The internet has been ruthless to Episode 1, pointing out several quote-unquote flaws with the film. There's too little time to discuss all of them, but I've put together the biggest ones here. When people don't like something, they band together and get it canceled. That is exactly what happened to Jar Jar. I'm not denying that the majority of viewers finds this character annoying, but I am curious why. If you look throughout Star Wars, there are so many other intentionally annoying characters like the loud beeping R2, the always screaming Chewbacca, or the Ewoks. I guess it's because Jar Jar says actual words or has so much screen time in comparison to those characters that people dislike him. I think too many people hop on the cancel culture train because it's fun, but they actually find Jar Jar deep down inside as okay. I really understand if you do hate Jar Jar, but for me, he fits in tune with the other annoying Star Wars characters, and I love him. People say that the scenes in the Senate just drag on. I say it makes the movie enjoyable for intellectuals. The politics in Episode 1 is actually the deepest and most complex thought piece in all of Star Wars. It shows how people's nature could cause an evil emperor to come to rise in power, plus it adds weight and build up for the more action-y climactic scenes, feeding into that perfect feedback loop that Episode 1 has. Why? It's not a precision sport like golf, it's more like BattleBots. One random factor can completely change the outcome. The only regulation in the sport is just to wait until Jabba says go. How can you not love it? Now, I have said some outrageous things here, and to prove that I'm not unsympathetic to the counterpoint, let me add some fuel to your fire. Episode 1 came out when I was 9 years old, the perfect age for a Star Wars film, and it's the first Star Wars film I watched in theaters. I have a high amount of nostalgia for the film to this day. So, maybe my rose-tinted nostalgia glasses causes me to overlook the problems of the film and overpraise it, claiming it to be the best Star Wars film. Or maybe the black-tinted glasses of internet culture has caused others to see it as the worst film in the series. Now, the truth probably lies somewhere in between those two, but for me, Episode 1 is best Star Wars. The scenes in episode 2 build well upon each other, and the scenes in episode 2 build well upon each other,